For the second part of 4-5, we are going to add one part. First part of 4-5, we learned how to find x-intercepts. The second part, we're now going to add the vertex. Okay, we know that a quadratic is a U-shaped graph. Okay, so we want to be able to, at the end of this, sketch a graph of a quadratic equation using the two x-intercepts, or one, if there's only one, and the vertex. So how do we find a vertex, or what is a vertex? A vertex is the highest or lowest point. So if I think of this as my graph, and here's my vertex is the highest or the lowest point on that graph. So if we have the two x-intercepts and the vertex, we can sketch a picture of that graph. That's what we're going to do today. Now the way to do that is to use this formula. Okay? Remember, vertex is an x and a y point. Okay? So in order to find the x, we're just going to take negative b over 2a, if this is a and b, in my standard form equation. And then we're going to take the answer to that and we're going to plug it into the original equation to find my y value. So let's go ahead and do a few examples. Okay? Now we already know how to find the x-intercepts based on the first part. So let's do that first, because the directions say find the x-intercepts and vertex of the quadratic equation, or quadratic, and sketch the graph. First thing I'm going to do is set it equal to 0. It already is. Look for a greatest common factor or a negative out in front. I don't have any, so now I'm going to factor it into two binomials. 1 times 10 gives me 10. That adds up to 7. 2 factors of 10, that add up to 7. 2 and 5. So I have n plus 2 and n plus 5. So in order to make that true, either n plus 2 has to be 0 or n plus 5 equals 0. So I'm going to go ahead and solve that to find my x-intercepts. Subtract 2, I have n equals negative 2, subtract 5, n equals negative 5. So those are my two x-intercepts where the graph crosses the x-axis. So I have negative 2, 0, and negative 5, 0. Now, in order to sketch a picture of the graph, I need the vertex. So let's use that new formula that we have in order to find the vertex. If you remember from the front, to find the vertex, okay, I need negative b over 2a, and then I need f of negative b over 2a, assuming my quadratic is a function. So the x value, which is this, equals negative b over 2a. Well, how do I know what a, b, and c are? I'm going to go up here. A is 1, b is 7, c is 10. So negative b is negative 7 over 1 times 2. Negative b over 2a, which gives me negative 7 over 2. Now, you can change that to a decimal since we do have to graph it. However, in order to solve the second part, I want to probably leave that as is. Okay? Then y, I'm going to take that answer to my part A, or to my x value, and I'm going to plug it in my original equation for every variable. I'm going to replace the variable with my solution to find my y value. So now I'm going to put in, so that was negative 7 over 2 squared. Okay, it was plus 7 times negative 7 over 2 plus 10, I believe. Make sure that's right. Yes. Okay, so now I would simplify that. Now, if you have no idea how to do that, you can use a graphing calculator, or you can use Desmos as well. I'll use Desmos so you can see it done, or you can change this to a decimal and you can use a calculator, but I'll show you how to do it with a calculator. So here's Desmos. I'm going to go ahead and plug in a fraction to start. See if I can do it here. Fraction is, usually it's right here. Hold on, let me find it. I forgot for Desmos, in order to put in a fraction, all I have to do is just use a division sign. So I have a parenthesis, then negative, which my negative is right here, 7 over 2, and then squared. Squared is, I don't think I have squared there. Nope, squared is down here. Okay, negative 7 over 2 squared plus 7 times 7 over 2 plus 10. Oh, I used the backslash instead of the forward slash, so let me change that. There we go. Use the wrong symbol. My fault. You got to use the division symbol over here. And then it'll give you an answer. There we go. So, did I do that right? What did I miss? Negative. There we go, negative 2.25. So now that I have Desmos figured out, I usually do it by hand, but now that I have Desmos figured out, that'll give you the answer. So negative 2.25 is my y value. So my vertex is negative 7 over 2, or if you change that to a decimal, you can also have negative 3.5, comma, negative 2.25. Now, here is where we're going to sketch a graph, okay? We are going to graph the vertex, negative 2, 0, and negative 5, 0. And now we're going to sketch, or we're going to go ahead and plot negative 3.5 and negative 2.5, which is right here, or 2.25, so it's a little up a little further. And then we can sketch an image of the graph, okay? Now, mine obviously doesn't go through perfectly, but that's about what the graph looks like, which is super helpful. Let's go ahead and try another one. All right, so here we are. Let's go ahead and do this. First things first, let's go ahead and find the x-intercepts. So I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. So I have 2x squared plus x minus 10 equals 0. No greatest common factor, no negative out in front. 2 times negative 10 is negative 20. That adds up to 1. Factors of 20 are 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. 4 and 5, so I'd have 5 and negative 4. So I have x plus 5 and x minus 4. And since I have an a value of 2, make sure you divide each by 2 and simplify if possible. 5 over 2 does not simplify, so I'm going to take my 2 and put it out in front of the x. So I have 2x plus 5. 4 over 2 does simplify, so I'm going to simplify that, and I have x minus 2. In order to find our x-intercepts, we're going to have to set those equal to 0. So I have 2x plus 5 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. Subtract 5, so I have 2x equals negative 5, divide by 2, x equals negative 5 over 2, add 2, x equals 2. Now, those are my x-intercepts. If you want to write them in as an ordered pair, that's fine. So I have negative 5 over 2, comma 0, and I have 2, comma 0. Now let's find our vertex. My a, b, and c value are 2, 1, negative 10. A is 2, b is 1, c is negative 10. So remember, in order to find the x value for your vertex, it's just negative b over 2 times a. Negative b would be negative 1 over 2 times 2, which is negative 1/4. My y value, I'm going to plug in negative 1/4. Now here's the other option. If you want to, you can change your negative 1/4 into a decimal, and you can use a decimal instead. So 1 divided by, negative 1 divided by 4, most of us know this, is negative 0.25. So if you want to do that, and that's easier for you, go ahead and use a decimal as long as you're not rounding it. So I have 2 times negative 0.25 squared plus negative 0.25 minus 10. So let's go ahead and plug that in there. Down here, so I have 2 times negative 0.25 squared, was it plus minus plus a negative 0.25. And then I believe it was minus 10. And it's negative 10.125. So if that's easier, instead of using a fraction, you can do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get negative 10.125, and that is my vertex. So I have negative 0.25 and negative 10.125. Now let's go ahead and sketch a graph of those using that information. The first two are my two X-intercepts, negative 5 over 2, comma 0, which is just negative 2.5, which is here. And then I have 2, 0, which is here. My vertex is, why did I put 2 parentheses? Whoops, that's a point, not 2 parentheses. There we go. Negative 0.25 and negative 10.125. Negative 0.25 is almost 0, and negative 10.125 is about right here. Go ahead and sketch a graph. And there it is. Okay, let's go ahead and do one more example. All right, for this one, in order to factor, I have to set it equal to 0 first, so I'm going to subtract 20x from both sides. So I have 25x squared minus 20x equals 0.
Emily Sutton, if you were in the building.
All right, now we're going to go have factor a greatest common factor, which is 5x. Divide by 5x, divide by 5x. So I have 5x minus 4 equals 0. This reduces to 5. One of the x's cancels out. This reduces to 4, and both of the x's cancel out. So here I have this. Now, since I don't have a squared anymore, I'm done factoring. So I'm going to set both of those equal to 0 to get my x-intercepts. Divide by 5, x equals 0. Add 4. Divide by 5, x equals 4/5. So there are my two x-intercepts. So I have 0, 0, and I have 4/5, also, which is also 0.8, comma 0. So now I need to find my vertex. And my original equation was 25x squared minus 20x. And since I don't have a constant or a c value, that means it's just plus 0. So a is 25, b is negative 20, and c is 0. So in order to find x, I need negative b over 2 times a, negative negative 20. Got ahead of myself there. Negative negative 20 divided by 2 times 25. Double negatives makes it positive over 50. Reduce it, I get 2/5. Also, if you divide those in a calculator, you're going to get 0.4. That's my x value. To find my y value, I have to take that 0.4 and plug it in and replace the x's. So I have 25 times 0.4 squared. Remember, you can use the fraction or the decimal, doesn't matter, minus, as long as you're not rounding, minus 20 times 0.4. Remember that to plug it in. So I have 25 times 0.4 squared minus 20 times 0.4. And that's it. So I get negative 4. So let's go ahead and plug that in. Equals negative 4. And there's my vertex. 0.4, comma, negative 4. Now let's go ahead and graph those on my graph. What do I have here? I have my two vertex, or my two x-intercepts, excuse me, 0, 0, and 4/5, 0. They're going to be about right here. This is definitely 0, 0. 4/5, 0 is just underneath 1. And then I have my vertex of negative or 0.4 and -4. So 0.4 is almost halfway, and -4, 1, 2, 3, 4 is down here. So I have a very skinny graph, which makes sense because my A value is 25, which really stretches out the graph.